On behalf of the University of Hawaii, I'd like to welcome you all and respectfully offer a land acknowledgement. Wherever you are today, we each of us still exist on land, not only in cyberspace. So please, pause, take a moment, and look out of a window, take a deep breath, and sense your connection to where you are. I recognize Hawaii as an indigenous place and ask us all to honor all Native Hawaiians, the ancestral descendants of these lands, who have lived, played, laughed, loved, and taken care of the places of Hawaii for generations upon generations. I spoke to Krista from her home in Manoa Valley, located in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki in the Moku of Kona on the Mokupuni of Oahu in the Pai'aina of the Hawaiian Islands. Dr. Krista Heiser is a professor of composition at Kapiolani Community College and serves as the director of the University of Hawaiʻi Center for Sustainability Across the Curriculum. Her PhD is in Educational Administration, Higher Education, and she specializes in designing, implementing, and assessing sustainability curriculum initiatives at the individual course and assignment level or at a program, college, and system level. Her research uses focus groups, interviews, and reflective writing to learn more about student and faculty perspectives on climate change and sustainability on campus and in the classroom. This presentation is both a progress report and an invitation for the AISHI community to provide questions, queries, current research, sources, and wonderings. Krista will share ways you can follow the study, contribute, or perhaps even participate. She'll be checking the chat before, during, and after the conference, and you can also follow the study on Krista's Medium blog, Teaching Climate in Higher Education.
We launched the Teaching Climate Change study this past January with a workshop called Teaching Climate Change Affectively. I conducted 22 interviews over the summer. They've been transcribed, and I've been doing thick description and personal reflections on my blog on Medium. It's called Teaching Climate Change in Higher Education. To me, the blog is really keeping the project alive, and it's already informing our work in order to better support faculty in this difficult work. So what we're talking about today is sort of where we're at as I begin the coding and we move into the next set of 20 interviews.
So Krista, tell us about the study.
Well, in 2018, we conducted focus groups with about 200 students on 8 of our campuses. We wanted to better understand what students were actually learning about climate change across different disciplines. 2 findings really stood out. One is that students refer to their own lived experience as the main source of their knowledge about climate change. College faculty ranked 4th. The other finding, of course, was about the pervasive background emotions of fear, anger, sadness, and shame, as well as hope, which we've enjoyed sharing with the AISHI community. We found that anytime we can create cognitive resonance between what is happening in the classroom and the sociocultural field of experience, that's going to increase student learning. And addressing these emotions is critical to the learning of anything, not just climate change. We had included faculty focus groups in the study, but after conducting just a few of those, the intensity of the conversations really indicated that there was something here that was big and warranted its own study. The faculty focus groups were revealing a sense of overwhelm, moral responsibility, humility, and some frustration. This comment really stood out to me. Personally, I'm depressed all the time. My problem is I've spent 25 years in my classroom being objective, not pursuing my viewpoint. And I really find it hard because I want to push my viewpoint. I don't want to go in there anymore and be balanced. I know I'm preachy. I'm very conflicted, but this is too important for me to be posturing my academic balance and blah, 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 the planet is dying. Now, if students are offended, I don't care. And if I get a grievance for she's shoving things down their throats. Whoa. And as we enter the next 20 interviews, I'm beginning coding, which I'll share with you today. We're adjusting our sampling and using a grounded theory approach to allow for emergent themes.
Gosh, that's a lot of books. I know you're a big reader, but seriously?
Well, this is just a tiny fraction of my reading on this subject over the last 10 years. And of course, this doesn't represent digital books and journal articles and things like that. But they do kind of illustrate some of the major chunks, let's say, in the literature review. We've got the curriculum literature, which is mostly descriptive, procedural, looking at how we're teaching systems thinking and the role of the disciplines, which is a big topic. A book that I really like called Teaching Sustainability, Teaching Sustainably really sums up what I've seen as the situation that faculty either think climate change is somebody else's problem, it's not my discipline, or they are uncomfortable with teaching to a value system, as in the quote that I shared earlier. And then there's the indigenous literature, which is so important. It's not just about traditional ecological knowledge, but really about different ways of knowing. And of course, Dr. Manulani Aluli-Meyer is also a co-investigator on the study, and her work just informs everything that I love to think about. There's the theory literature, like folks like Timothy Morton talking about hyperobjects, and Bruno Latour. I've been thinking a lot about this thing Latour talks about. He calls it Attractor 3, a way to get us out of this kind of trap of neoliberalism that we're in inside higher education. And I love Charles Eisenstein, and we've been watching the Rebel Wisdom series on sense making, and that's all been very influential. And then there's the emotion and the psychology literature, which is so important right now. There's something called pre-traumatic stress syndrome, and now folks are talking about continuous traumatic stress syndrome. I've been very influenced by Renee Lertzman's work. Renee Lertzman is a psychologist, and her work, Environmental Melancholia, really informed my methodology. And have I mentioned that suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people 15 to 24, and that 1 in 10 youth in Hawaii have attempted suicide? This literature is very important, and the counseling perspectives are very important to the study. In the professional development world, I work with Dina Metzger and the Way of Counsel, or DARE. And that's definitely informed the way I see professional development. It's about coming together as peers for faculty to have that peer-to-peer learning and conversation. I also read a lot of Joanna Macy's work, and I realize how much Joanna Macy and Parker Palmer have in common. Parker Palmer really speaks to faculty teaching from a place of wholeness. And then lastly, currently, I'm reading a lot of collapsology. There's a book called Everything Can Collapse, and this collapse literature is really about coming to this stage of acceptance that is being called post-doom. And so really the questioning is, once we understand the climate crisis, what does it look like to teach in a post-doom university?
You've definitely sold me on the need for qualitative research and thick description. Having worked with you on the Worry and Hope study, I know that you use both statistics and intuition. Can you say a little more about the methodology?
Well, as I said, I've conducted 22 interviews so far. The target is 100. And I know that sounds crazy, but really each one is so important, so informative, and also therapeutic and relationship building for the interview subject. So I believe it's time well spent. So far, I've been using what's called convenient sampling. We are in a pandemic and it was summer, so I've been talking to people who trust me and are willing to talk to me. So that's really a great place to start because those interviews have a lot of trust, so they're very revealing and very vulnerable. We've gotten a lot of insights that way, and now I know what it is we really want to know as we go into the next set of interviews. So demographics are not key to the study, but I am seeking a balance. So far I've interviewed about half women and half men. About half of the interviews have been Caucasian, which is not too far off our faculty average, which is 43% Caucasian. I have interviewed 2 Asian participants, 2 African American participants, 1 Hawaiian, and 1 Latino participant. I'm using the same ethnicity categories that we use in our campus data. Age is kind of showing up. I have tended to interview mostly so far people who were my own age, Generation X, but I've interviewed 9 boomers and 6 millennials. And already I'm seeing that it really matters what time period you grew up in and when you received your undergraduate and doctoral education. The big goal in what's called purposive sampling is to interview a broad range of disciplines. So far I've interviewed 16 disciplines and no more than 2 faculty in any one discipline. There are 98 bachelor's programs on our flagship campus, so just figuring out the map of the territory is quite interesting. There are 2,697 full-time faculty in our university system. And in the United States, let's say 780,000 faculty are full-time, 1.5 million if you count part-timers and adjuncts. So achieving a statistically significant sample with interviews of this depth is impossible. But what we're looking for is saturation, and we are nowhere near that. The study, I would also call it phenomenological. That means that what I'm really trying to reveal, to articulate, is what is it like to be a faculty member at this time? You know, it's so intense right now, and it's such a job of great responsibility. The interview protocol is based around 8 questions. And from Renee Lertzman, I took the idea of using what's called a SQUIN, a single question inducing narrative. So we start out very open-ended, talking about how'd you get into teaching, how'd you first learn about climate change, tell me how it's come up in your classroom, describe some of your assignments that work or that don't work. And then I close with a question, tell me what it's like to be you. I transcribe most of the interviews myself, which I consider to be a meditation and a form of deep listening. I then bring them into MaxQDA, which is a qualitative coding software. I also write about them in the Field Notes blog that I mentioned, Teaching Climate Change in Higher Education. And this sounds a little corny, but in my blog, I call it Seeing the Jewel. I try to see each interview as its own world before it becomes just another data point. So then I input everything into MaxQDA, and then I'm ready to start coding. This slide shows some of the initial coding categories that I'm using. It's called emergent coding, and I do have 3 other researchers on the study with me. You, of course, Matt, Manu Meyer, who I've already mentioned, and a graduate student who's helping with the study. So I've had other eyes on the transcripts, and even coming up with these initial codes, you know, I've gotten to ask some other researchers on the study, what do you see here? So I'm excited about these codes. And MaxQDA then lets you kind of make word clouds and begin to look at this data in lots of different ways.
Tell me about this one, epiphanies and turning points.
Well, one thing I already noticed when I ask faculty, how did you learn about climate change, is either an aha or not an aha. And a lot of that depends on age. There are some faculty like me who had a big moment of realizing, you know, wow, what is happening to our planet? And then there's other faculty who say, I don't remember learning about climate change. It's always been there. So that's one difference, one pattern. It's an example of the kind of pattern that we see. And then there's a whole set of codes around epiphanies and turning points, which can be professional development workshops, which can be a particular book or film, read at a particular time, something like David Wallace Wells, I know, or in some cases, experiencing a climate event.
In the student study, we looked at behaviors and emotions. Are you finding any parallels between the two?
We have been talking about personal behaviors, and I don't know if it will turn out to be interesting or not. Several of the participants have become vegans. They talk about trying not to drive and trying not to fly, participating in restoration projects, and intentionally spending time in nature. There is a modeling component that I think is interesting that happens outside of class. So for example, one of the instructors who's a vegan says students love to ask him what he's eating for lunch. We're losing some of that right now with the remote learning. Another thing that I'm thinking about is more than a few of the faculty have mentioned a personal trauma that they've been through. And I wonder if that might be contributing to a personal resilience, and having to really do that deep work is something that they bring to their teaching. And then I have another code that I call getting it, which is about maybe where they're at on the spectrum of grief. There's denial, there's bargaining, there's anger, there's grief, and then there's acceptance, or what's being called post-doom. We are not at all on the same page about what is happening. So getting it is another code that I'm working with.
That's fascinating. What's going on in the classrooms?
Well, the pedagogy and the classroom stuff, we talk about assignments that work and assignments that don't work. I do have a second part to the study where I wanted to ask faculty to do a particular assignment, maybe that was kind of on the edge of their pedagogical practices, and then ask them to fill out a reflection about it. But it's been kind of a crazy semester, so I haven't done that yet, but I do hope to include that part of the study.
So in addition to being the director of the Center for Sustainability Across Curriculum for the whole university right now, you're also faculty. And what is that like now? What are you teaching now?
Well, this summer I taught my favorite course to teach, which is a climate fiction course. So my faculty position is teaching literature, composition, and rhetoric. This summer I got to teach my favorite course, which is called Landscapes in Literature, Cli-Fi, Sci-Fi, and the Culture of Sustainability. I'll be monitoring the chat related to this lightning talk before, during, and after the AISHE conference, and I really look forward to hearing from you. I really encourage you to follow the blog on Medium, Teaching Climate Change in Higher Education, where approximately every week I feature a different faculty interview. So that's one way you can follow the study. Let me know what I might be missing. Are there resources, maybe current research that you're engaged in that might connect to this study? I'm really interested in the edge of faculty thinking. You know, like what keeps you up at night? I think it's so important that we be honest and that we not be delusional about what and how we're teaching, because so much is at stake. And I look forward to connecting with you. I'm so grateful to you, Matt, and to Manu for working with me on this study, and to our leadership for supporting the Center for Sustainability Across the Curriculum, and to our friends at AISHE for helping us work together and really be a network of faculty and sustainability practitioners. Mahalo.